everyone, I'm Jess, and I'm the content manager at Course Report. Course Report is the resource for helping people find the right coding boot camps just for them. If you haven't used Course Report yet, check it out. You can research the best coding boot camps all over the world, read about which coding languages to learn, where to apply, and how to fund your coding bootcamp experience. Today, I'm so happy to have Rebecca and Gabriel joining us. They're both coding bootcamp alumni from Tech Elevator's Ohio campuses. And both Rebecca and Gabriel actually graduated a few years ago from Tech Elevator. So I've got questions for them, not only about their experience at the bootcamp, but also how they've grown and evolved in the tech world over the past couple of years. So let me introduce them. Rebecca Sullivan graduated 3 years ago from the Java Web Development Bootcamp at Tech Elevator's Cleveland campus. And Rebecca now works at Google in Boulder, Colorado. And Gabriel Sheely graduated from the Full Stack Web Development Bootcamp at the Columbus campus 3 years ago. And Gabriel now works at Accenture in Columbus, Ohio. So hi, Rebecca and Gabriel.
Hello.
Thanks so much for taking the time today. You both have really cool jobs now, so I want to talk about them soon, but let's start with what you were up to before Tech Elevator. So Rebecca, do you want to start? What were you up to?
Yeah, so right before Tech Elevator, I was working in marketing. If you rewind a little bit, I took a little bit of a strange path. So yeah. I did my undergrad in music performance. I went to a music conservatory in Cleveland. And then basically as I got to the end of my undergrad degree, realized I had some other skill sets besides performance. So I went and got an MBA at Case Western Reserve University, which is right across the street from where I did my undergrad. Found myself working in marketing for a couple years before Tech Elevator. In my day job at the time, I was working really closely with a tech VP. I worked at a pretty small company and did everything that was marketing related. And because it was a small company, we didn't really have like a design or a coding staff to like throw email marketing campaigns over the wall to. So anything marketing related, I had to do from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And I found myself in a position where I was like, well, I don't have design skills. I don't have coding skills. I need one or both of these to get some marketing efforts off the ground. So I ended up taking, some classes after work and figured out that what my friend, the tech VP, was doing seemed a lot more interesting than what I was doing. So after I figured out I was more interested in coding, I researched boot camps and decided to do Tech Elevator. It was a full-time program, of course, so I quit my job and went to Tech Elevator.
Nice. And Gabriel, what were you up to before you started Tech Elevator?
Nothing quite so interesting. I was a carpenter.
You were a carpenter? Oh, cool.
Yeah, so nothing tech related.
And then did you go to college before Tech Elevator as well, or do another kind of program?
I never graduated college. I did finish high school, but no, I started an associate's degree in computer science because that is the traditional path you take to get into development. Mm-hmm. However, just where I was at in my life with a family, I wasn't able to carve out the time to take the in-classroom classes. So I finished up pretty much all the online stuff I could do, mm-hmm. And then had to put that on the shelf as well. And then I found Tech Elevator.
And so with an associate's degree in computer science, why did you feel like you needed the coding bootcamp in order to transition into a career into the tech world?
Well, I never actually finished my associates.
Oh, I see.
That path. But yeah, I had to pull out before I actually finished it.
Got it.
But I think it was really the pathway mm-hmm. part of the Tech Elevator bootcamp that was the most attractive to me. Mm-hmm. Because I could learn development online through books. I had been doing it on my own for years, but really the pathway program connecting me with potential employers and also preparing me in terms of like resume writing, interview skills, interview practice, and just helping me identify experiences from my life prior to this career change that would mm-hmm. translate well into the tech field and that I could use to market myself. That was probably the most attractive part for me.
Nice. And Rebecca, why did you choose Tech Elevator specifically? Did you look into other coding boot camps? Like, what stood out for you about Tech Elevator?
Yeah, so there were two coding bootcamp searches I did. So one was comparing Tech Elevator to others in the Cleveland area. And then at one point I actually went through Tech Elevator with my husband in the same class.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So at one point we were looking at boot camps out in California because I have family out there. So we did one search out in the Bay Area. And what stood out to us about Tech Elevator over the ones in the Bay Area was that Tech Elevator is an object-oriented based curriculum. So their languages, at least in Cleveland at the time, were Java and C#, which is really attractive to us. A lot of the Bay Area ones are like JavaScript and very, very like JavaScript framework based. So we liked that that Tech Elevator's curriculum was more focused on object-oriented fundamentals. So that was one thing that stood out. And then looking at boot camps within Cleveland specifically, what stood out to us about Tech Elevator was the instructors that they just have a ton of actual real-world industry experience. So David Wintrick, who's the chief academic officer now, was teaching our Java class at the time. And he basically, his experience was with the Federal Reserve Bank in Cleveland. And he basically was the architect of the government's version of PayPal. It's like just architected this like giant system, and we thought that was really cool. Whereas not all boot camps have instructors with a ton of experience. A lot of boot camps will hire their own students right after to teach the curriculum, and that wasn't as attractive to us. So we liked that aspect of Tech Elevator.
Yeah, Gabriel, do you have anything to add to that?
I would second her on the quality of the teaching. My teacher had 10 plus years of industry experience and now works at Google, actually in San Francisco on their VR endeavors. So he was a great teacher. I pestered him every day with tons of questions, and rarely did he not have an answer for me. But also, like I had mentioned, the Pathway program was a real incentive for me. Just somebody to help me get my foot through the door and get those conversations started with potential employers. And also at the time, they were the only boot camp in Columbus. So that did narrow down the potential boot camps that I was going to work with. But yeah, it worked out.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was also wondering why you guys decided to go to Tech Elevator in Ohio, just because San Fran, New York City, those are well-known tech scenes, so they often attract a ton of boot campers. So that answers that as well. Thanks, guys. Rebecca, I think you've now moved to Boulder to work at Google. But Gabriel, you've stayed in the Columbus area, it seems like, in Columbus, Ohio. So what is it like for you now, Gabriel, to be working like in that tech scene in Columbus?
The tech scene in Columbus is actually rather vibrant. Most people wouldn't see Columbus as a big player in the tech scene. But we've got big presences with Chase and Huntington and AEP. Amazon's got data centers here. There are a lot of other companies starting to move in as Columbus increases its presence as a startup center. Also, one of the first smart city endeavors, the U.S. Department of Transportation gave Columbus a grant to develop a smart city infrastructure that would then be adopted by other cities. And so my company has actually spearheaded that endeavor with Columbus. So there's a lot of interesting work going on, but it's not so big as San Francisco to where rent and things like that are ridiculous. It's still a little bit reasonable, but there's lots of interesting work to do. The tech community is small enough and organized enough that it's really easy to meet people. So if there's something interesting going on in the city that you would want to work on, it's really easy to get connected with that company and get interviews and kind of move around. So it feels like like a bit more of a homegrown tech community,
Yeah.
not quite as commercialized as some of the bigger tech players like San Francisco or Nashville. So yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff going on and no shortage of jobs.
Perfect. I love learning about that, and I love just like getting that kind of information out to people who are wanting to move to a like more of a metropolitan area, but don't necessarily want to like, you know, have the crazy cost of living like San Fran or New York City.
They should consider Columbus.
Yeah, shout out to Columbus. So I know it's been a few years since you guys went to Tech Elevator, so we don't have to get too much into specifics, but let's talk briefly about your time as students there. So like, what was your day-to-day learning experiences? Did the teaching style work for you? Any pros and cons? Rebecca, do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah. So back when I went through Tech Elevator, the day-to-day structure that they had was lectures in the morning. So they'd present a new topic, and then you'd break for lunch and then come back. And usually there was a pair programming exercise, and they rotated pairs. So you ended up working with most of the other people in your cohort.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really great learning experience, because sometimes you'd be paired with someone who got things much quicker than you, or much more quickly. Sometimes you get paired with someone around your level. Sometimes you get paired where you understood something more quickly than they did. So you, there's value in that, of like getting someone else to up to speed. So I'd say that was a really great learning experience, because you not only got to practice the coding skills you were learning, but you also got to practice like, what is it going to be like on a team where I have to work with people who are different from me, which of course is on every team. So I found that really valuable. The rest of sort of the curriculum was, we had like capstone projects. So you would not only be learning day-to-day concepts, but you would put them all together in, I think every couple of weeks they had like a larger project that you would work on with a pair. So that was nice to have a goal that you're working towards. Also, in true full stack bootcamp style, it was, you know, a variety of topics. So everything from object-oriented fundamentals, which I mentioned before, to a little bit of front end, a little bit of database work. And then of course, at the end of the program, we tied all of that together and got to do a kind of like microcosm of Agile experience in a 2-week like wrap-up project. Wow. Yeah.
Gabriel, was yours a similar kind of experience?
Yeah, for sure. Like Rebecca said, the schedule is pretty packed. You try to cram as much into those 14 weeks as possible. So it's very aggressive pace. They're not giving you a ton of time to really absorb stuff in the classroom setting. It's kind of like learn it, practice it, build something with it. Okay, next topic. So my experience was that it tends to be more geared towards people that are very self-driven. The classes are not overly large, but it's large enough that the teacher doesn't have a ton of time to be like holding each student's hand through the program. So it's expected that the students do a lot of work on their own, really digging deeper into the topics, and if they do have questions, bringing those questions up. So it's very much a self-driven program. You get out of it what you put into it. And if you put a lot of work into it, you'll see a lot of benefit. A lot of times they spout their employee or their student hiring rates, like so many percentage of students get jobs following the boot camp, but they will not do the work to get you the job. You have to put that work in yourself as a student, and it may be harder than most people expect. It's 40 hours of like in classroom work, but I was probably putting in 60 hours a week of like actually doing the work, staying up till midnight most nights, going in early. But I enjoyed that. That's kind of what I was looking for. So the curriculum was right on spot with what I expected.
And for both of you guys, like how diverse was your cohort? Like what was the the gender ratio? And also, did you guys build like your own network there? Do you feel like you still are connected with people there?
Yeah, I definitely, not only do I feel connected with the people in my cohort, but I still try to stay engaged even after having moved, but was obviously more engaged when I was there in person, because they've got a really great, just not only like sense of community amongst current students, but also in their alumni network. So it was fun to see. I think in Cleveland, I was the second full cohort that they had after a pilot cohort. So I stayed pretty connected. It was neat to see the alumni network like grow and grow and grow after each cohort. I used to joke that I measured my life in tech elevator cohorts.
I love it.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely like a bond you have with the people you go through boot camp with. It's almost like, I don't know, military boot camp or something. Like there's just a sense of camaraderie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Gabriel, what about you?
I think I must be less social than Rebecca. I don't really stay connected with anybody else from my cohort. I'll bump into them every once in a while at a meetup, or if I happen to go to a tech elevator like social gathering. But I still stay in touch with Katie, the director. And so I still stay in touch more with the leadership than some of the other students, because I was the first cohort in Columbus. So there weren't any like previous people to connect with. And then, quickly got absorbed in work after graduation. So I didn't stay as connected with some of the other cohorts following me. But I think, like Rebecca said, there is a great network of tech elevator alumni in the city who, are all over. There's a bunch of them that have been hired at Accenture now. And so I've met them and interacted with some of them. So that's definitely a benefit. And because when we went through the boot camp, nobody had ever heard of Tech Elevator in Columbus. There was no previous reputation to ride on. Now there's been multiple generations, if you want to call it that, of Tech Elevator students that have gone into the workplace. People have seen the quality of the students that Tech Elevator is putting out and the good experience that employers have had. And so even though the market's more saturated because there are multiple boot camps and the boot camps have all gotten larger, you do have the benefit of previous cohorts coming before you and proven that Tech Elevator turns out high quality employees. And so you kind of have that helping.
Nice. So switching over to what you guys are doing now, which is both very exciting. So Rebecca, today you're now a software engineer at Google in Boulder. So congrats. Without giving away any company secrets, can you tell us kind of what you're working on right now as a software engineer?
So I work on Google Drive. The Google Drive team is based in Boulder. So obviously Google's got a big Mountain View and New York presence with teams that are based out of those offices. But fortunately, Drive is centered in Boulder, and we have some people who are remote in the other offices. But what I really like is like our core engineering team is here. So I work specifically on the Google Drive API. So if you were an external app that wanted to integrate with Google Drive, you might have even seen, if you've been in Drive and you enable like an integration with another app, like a PDF viewer or something like that, they're communicating with us through our API. So we maintain the API for external clients and also internal clients. So for example, like our mobile front ends and our web front end go through the API. Sometimes I joke that we're the back end of the front end and the front end of the back end, because we're like right the entry point to the rest of the back end of the stack. So, right now I'm just working on internal like infrastructure migration project that's been really interesting so far.
Cool.
But yeah.
And also, I noticed that you didn't go straight from Tech Elevator to Google. It seems like your career's progressed since 2016. So what was it like kind of going from Tech Elevator to Google? Did you feel like you needed a little bit more time before you could get in a company like Google? Or do you think that you could have gone like right from Tech Elevator into a similar position?
Yeah, so I like to think of it like a computer science degree is great, right? It gives you a lot of the theoretical fundamentals, like it's really strong on the theory side. And a boot camp's really strong on the other side of the spectrum, which is like practical. I can use all these skills for my programming job tomorrow. And I think in reality, you need both. So I think I see a lot of computer science graduates that are weak on the practical side, and I see bootcamp graduates who are weak on the theory side, which is definitely where I was at and right after graduation. So you have to bridge the gap in some respects. Like I don't think that if I had interviewed for Google or the big tech giants out there right out of the bootcamp that I would have been 100% prepared. Just because there's a lot of stuff you pick up on the job that they don't necessarily teach you in a boot camp. And that's not just Tech Elevator, that's most curriculums. Like once you have practical experience with a lot of like day-to-day problems and tools, and there are just so many things that are tangential to the actual coding skills you learn in a boot camp that round you out as a developer. I'm not saying it's impossible to go from Tech Elevator and other boot camp and succeed at a job at a place like Google. But I think for me, I definitely leaned on the real world experience I had in 2 different jobs before getting to Google.
And Gabriel, you're a senior software artisan at Accenture today. So what kinds of projects are you working on there?
So at present, I am the tech lead on a project with a large medical device manufacturer. So they brought us because Accenture is a consulting company, so we take a little bit different approach than like a product company like Google. So we're working with them to help them change the way in which they innovate in terms of technology, because they've been making medical devices for 100 years, but software has slowly changed the way in which those are integrated within the medical environment. And so we're helping them sort of bring them into the 21st century, change the way in which they innovate, make sure they're building software with the end users in mind, rather than just a bunch of people in the back with a bunch of rules that we're implementing in our software, but make sure it's both and, that it meets all the legal requirements for medical software, but also is really easy for the users to interact with. So engaging in that, and I was in the automotive industry before that, writing embedded automotive software.
Cool. It sounds like there's just like lots of different types of projects you're at Accenture that you're in.
Yep, and that's kind of why I like consulting, because I get bored easily. So if I worked on the same thing for too long, I'd probably go crazy. So consulting is a nice balance where I get to challenge myself. My first client after Tech Elevator had nothing to do with Java. It was all operations. So it was spinning up cloud platforms and managing distributed Linux systems, which I knew nothing about. So I enjoy that. I like a challenge. I like being thrown into situations where I have to learn new things. So that's another thing, is there are different types of tech jobs following a boot camp like Tech Elevator. I see it very similar to the medical industry, where you could say, I want to get into medicine, but that could mean prescribing insoles for people or cutting someone's heart out of their chest, right? And each of those might not be right for every person. So it's really important to figure out, like, what aspect of tech am I really interested in? What are the things about tech that really get me excited, and sort of targeting those employers.
And Gabriel, after you finished Tech Elevator, you've mentioned before you were in the apprentice, so you were a software apprentice. Can you tell us a bit more about the apprenticeship in tech and how you spun that into a full-time job?
Yeah, so the company I was originally hired at was called Pillar Technologies, and they were acquired by Accenture about a year ago. So Pillar started the apprenticeship program, which is not an internship. So generally, there are a lot of tech internships, which means you work for free for somebody, and they benefit from your unpaid labor. But the apprenticeship is a fully paid, salaried position with benefits.
Wow.
And it's just an opportunity for someone that comes from a non-technical background to work their way into the tech industry, but with sort of an on-ramp period. So there's a fully dedicated staff member that works with a team of apprentices to get them up to speed from a technical perspective. So learning a lot of the things that they don't teach you in most colleges or boot camps. So getting really good at Git, getting good on the command line, learning how to use different, continuous integration, deployment softwares that are out there. A lot of the things that just aren't taught in scholarly settings, but everyone uses in the real world. And then also helping people improve their consulting skills. So once they go out on a client, they're able to engage the client really well. So it's like a 3 to 4 month program where it's just focused on learning, and then they roll you out onto a client.
That's awesome. That sounds like a great way to like just get into the tech world, the tech jobs. I wanted to go back a little bit because you guys each learned Java at Tech Elevator. Are you still using Java today in your current jobs?
Yeah, so I went through the Java program at Tech Elevator. My first job out of the boot camp, which was a document management or enterprise content management software company in Cleveland. I worked there for almost 2 years in C#.NET. Then I went back to Java at my job right before Google, and then I'm also working in Java now at Google.
What about you, Gabriel?
So I started in operations, like I said.
Right.
Didn't touch a lick of Java. The last 2 projects I've been on have been Android based, so working mostly in Java.
And then Rebecca, I think there's a misconception in the community that you could go from like a coding boot camp, graduate, and then just land a senior developer job and be set for the rest of your life, which sounds nice. But looking back, how do you feel like you've grown as a software engineer like since graduating?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's that misconception too.
Yeah.
And I think too, not just at Tech Elevator, but at boot camps in general, there's a thing that goes along with that misconception that like, oh, well, you'll make a ton of money in the tech industry. So like, just go learn some skills for 3 months and then you'll make a ton of money and you'll be good for the rest of your life and never have to like learn anything again. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, seeing the people who have succeeded in my cohort and in subsequent cohorts, the people who've done really well are the people who just really like tech and the industry and whatever niche that they've gotten themselves into, that Gabriel is mentioning, whatever part that they've found that they're passionate about, that's the sustainable part. I think so right out of a boot camp, you do have a lot of skills. Like you are ready to be an active junior developer in a solid role right after a boot camp. And I think those skills and tools that Gabriel mentioned too, like continuous integration and source control and the DevOpsy side of things, like how do you take something from development to production? How do you actually deploy code? All of those skills are really what you build up over the years, and are those real world skills that a bootcamp or a academic environment doesn't teach you. So I think, over the years, you definitely, if you have the one unique thing about the tech industry is that if you're not developing your skills constantly, you're falling behind. So, there are some industries where you can be marketing in the business side of the world. There are a lot of people in the industry who were complacent and just set to say, well, we've done this the same way for the past 10 years. So let's continue doing it this way. And if you take that mindset in the tech industry, you're gonna flounder. So that is something that really excites me, because it means if I'm learning stuff, then I'm constantly updating my skills, and I'm always valuable to someone as an employer. But on the flip side of the coin, if you think that you're going to go to a boot camp and get everything dropped in your lap, including a job, then yeah, that's not too realistic.
And Gabriel, what do you see as like the difference or the differences between being like a junior developer and then a senior developer?
I mean, I second a lot of the stuff that Rebecca said.
Yeah.
I don't know how many, senior developers I worked with who were just constantly learning new things, challenging themselves, pushing themselves. And that's why they're good at what they do. So one thing that isn't different is just constant learning. So as a junior developer, I was primarily learning from others because there was just so much I didn't know, so much I didn't have experience with, that I was always asking questions, having people draw things on whiteboards so that I could understand things better. And that hasn't changed. I still do that every day.
Nice.
I think the scope of your responsibilities changes. So as a junior developer, I was basically just responsible for, the code that me and my pair would produce, and the work that I was responsible for pushing through and making sure that that was quality and coordinated with everybody else. So it was sort of, I was mainly focused on me. But as I've moved into more of like a tech lead role, now I'm also coordinating with the client to make sure that the solution that we're building is meeting the business needs that they have, that it's solving the problems that they came to us with, that the team is doing well, so it moves beyond just tech focused about writing code, but it becomes more people focused as well. I think there's a lot of misconception about developers just being kind of introverted, nerdy people that sit at their desks with their headphones on and write code all day and go home and don't interact. But that's not true. Tech is very collaborative. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of working together in teams and coordinating with other people, because there's more going on than one person can manage. So there is a lot of communication. I communicate far more in my current job than I did in any other job I've ever had. So yeah, it's a lot of managing my team, making sure everybody's happy, that they have everything they need. So that's one of the biggest differences, is the focus, from focusing primarily on code to being more of a holistic focus and focusing more on the wider picture of what's going on.
And Gabriel, for you, did you find it like easier, or was it just as hard trying to land your second tech job after Tech Elevator?
Well, since it was an acquisition, it was really easy.
Oh, so you didn't even have to interview again. Yeah.
No, because with so the benefit of a consulting company being acquired is that you are the product.
Yeah.
So they're very motivated to just keep you on because you're the thing that makes money for them.
Right.
Whereas if it's a product company that's acquired, you're not quite as valuable as the product that you've built. So it was an easy.
Okay.
I just had to sign some papers and transferred all my checks started coming from somewhere else.
Nice. So it was, definitely easy for you. So Rebecca, what's your advice for these recently graduated boot campers who are now on the job hunt?
So I think if you've just graduated from a boot camp and you're looking for a job, I would say don't underestimate the value of soft skills. Someone once told me that soft skills and technical skills are like multipliers. So if you think of like your soft skills on a 0 to 10 scale and your technical skills on a 0 to 10 scale, if you're really strong on the technical side, let's say you're 10 and you're just blowing things away, but you are 1 or 0 on the soft skills side, you're not going to be able to communicate your value to employers. But of course, if it's the other way around, if you're just like a super gregarious person who everyone loves to work with, and you're 10 on the soft skills, and I've seen examples of this, of people I've worked with, but your technical skills are terrible, obviously that's going to be a challenge too. So I'd say to try to look at your skills on the whole and not neglect whatever side you're weaker on. I think a lot of times people kind of brush over the soft skills and the transferable skills from like the before boot camp parts of their resumes. And I think for me, I actually worked in roles pretty similar to what Gabriel is describing right out of the boot camp. I was working on the services side of things. And those soft skills were absolutely invaluable to people, because finding people who can, who are strong on the technical side, but can also talk to customers and communicate things in a way that makes sense on the business side as well as the technical side. That combination is very valuable. And even if you're not in a customer facing role, having someone who is just an easy to work with coworker on the team, you know, when people are interviewing you, they're imagining like, oh, what would this person be like to go to lunch with, right? And to see 40 hours a week, right? And you want obviously they're thinking they want to hire someone that they're gonna not only just tolerate, but but enjoy working with for a very good portion of their day.
And Rebecca, when we think of Google in that technical interview, just like seems really intimidating. Did you feel like you were prepared for the technical interview for Google because of your work with Tech Elevator?
Yeah, it definitely, Tech Elevator taught me how to teach myself. So it's not that Tech Elevator taught me how to answer whiteboard algorithm problems per se, but they gave me the skills of kind of like what Gabriel was saying earlier in the interview. Like there's so much crammed into such a short period of time that when it came to, okay, I need to prepare for interviews and I've got 10 or 20 hours after work a week to really focus on this, how can I make the most out of studying for that amount of time? That's what Tech Elevator, I think, taught really, really well. So it was, it's definitely an intimidating process.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think preparation, it makes you feel a little less intimidated. I'm not saying it's not scary, but I think a lot of people just underestimate. They think, oh, the Google interview is really scary. And then they don't practice enough. And then they go through the interview process and they're like, oh no. But I think if you prepare and you give yourself enough time to prepare and really know what to expect and do your research, it's a little less scary.
Awesome. And I have to ask, when you guys were both applying for tech jobs since Tech Elevator, have either of you run up against any kind of bias against bootcamp grads?
I've noticed it way more on internal teams once I've gotten a job and gotten in the door in a job, that there's stigma around. People will ask, oh, what school did you go to? And I'll say, I know what you're going after in that question, and it's a long story. I can tell you about my music degree and an MBA and a boot camp, but I think what you really want to know is what computer science program you went through, right? I think recruiters, like the external facing people in companies, they really need people to fill jobs, especially in the Cleveland market, because they're starved for tech talent out there. They're really looking for people to fill technical roles. No stigma whatsoever from getting an interview and getting in the door, from my perspective.
What about you, Gabriel?
For me, there were a couple companies I was interested in that required bachelor's degrees or master's degrees, but those have been fairly small. And I think some of those are for legal reasons, if they're doing like government work or something like that. But definitely within the company I'm at, I haven't sensed any of that, because I think there's a big emphasis on holistically coming up with solutions for problems. And so realizing that, hey, you've got this background, which is really different than this background. Those different perspectives help us come up with better solutions than if everybody's coming at it from a computer science degree perspective, right? So like the medical client I'm on, one of my coworkers was a nurse. Another one is from Siberia, another, like there's a lot of different perspectives and backgrounds, and they recognize the strength in that. So I haven't noticed that, but I'm sure it's out there.
I just always wonder, because I feel like it's changing so much every year, even just the climate towards, or the tech sensibility towards boot campers. It seems to be, there's a lot more grads these days. So I think that tech jobs are more welcoming towards boot campers. So Gabriel, on your tech journey, what has been like the biggest challenge or roadblock for you on learning to code?
I think the biggest challenge is probably one that a lot of people face, and that's just, what do I learn? Like, where do I start? Because it's such a broad space that it's like, well, what language do I learn? There are 100 different languages that people will recommend. And then within that language, there's like 20 frameworks. And then within those frameworks, there's all these other tools that get thrown at you. And so it's like, oh, well, I started wanting to learn web development, and now I'm learning something called Webpack and Grunt. And I don't even know what those things do, but someone said I should learn them. And I think that's probably the hardest thing, is just where do I start? Because once you start, you go down this rabbit hole of infinite things to learn. So I think the hardest part was just finding that one thing to learn, which the boot camp kind of helps with, because they have a set curriculum and they're like, okay, you're learning this thing and these other like 10 things, but mostly this thing. So for me, that was Java, but then they dove into like CSS and SQL and a few other things. But that was probably one of the big challenges. And then just the challenge of continuously learning. You can't stop once you finish the boot camp. You have to continuously be pushing yourself and asking questions and learning and stretching yourself and trying to make yourself better at what you do. Because like Rebecca said, if you don't, then you get left behind.
And then to just wrap up our talk today, what advice do both of you have for people who are starting to think of making this career change into tech and going through a coding boot camp like Tech Elevator? Like, what do you wish that you had known?
All of the technologies. No, I think probably the biggest thing is when it came to learning how to develop, I basically took all of the paths. So I did self-taught for a few years, and then I took college courses, and then I did a boot camp. I think one of the biggest things that people could do is do self-taught coding for a number of months to figure out if they even like it before they drop, $15,000 on a coding boot camp, only to realize that like, yeah, actually this isn't much fun. I don't want to do this. Teach yourself for a few months. And if you find that you enjoy it and you're able to stick with it when nobody's making you and you haven't really paid anything to do it, then it might be a good clue that like, hey, I could do this for a job and really enjoy it. But if you do that for a while and you find yourself having to force yourself to do those exercises and learn, then maybe it's not worth investing all of that time and money in.
And Rebecca, do you have any last pieces of advice?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Gabriel just said. There's so many free or very inexpensive resources that aren't $15,000 in a quit your job to figure out if you like it. I guess, something that people considering Tech Elevator's program always ask me, should I do C# or Java? And they get very hung up over the C# or Java question. And like Gabriel said, there's so many places you could start. And I'd say if you're just learning to code, it really doesn't matter. Like it really
just dive
doesn't.
in.
Just find like start with some language that you think sounds interesting, whether that's some online program or bootcamp, whatever it might be, and figure out if you like it from there. Because eventually, over the course of a couple years, programming languages fall into a few different categories and follow similar patterns. So and the same thing is true with different tools and concepts. So once you've learned one particular type of source control, you don't need to start from scratch and go learn another, well, you might need to learn it for another job, but it's going to be a lot easier to go pick up a second one once you already know Git, for example.
Yeah.
C#'s a lot easier to learn when you already know Java. So the TLDR of all of that is just pick a starting place. Don't get too hung up over, is what I'm learning correct or the right place to start? Like, it is a place to start, and you'll course correct as you go.
Perfect. I feel like that's a great way to cap this discussion. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Rebecca and Gabriel. And thanks to everyone for tuning in and watching this interview. We will be posting a transcript of this interview on the Course Report blog with contact information for Tech Elevator. So in case you're inspired to apply for an upcoming cohort, you can find the information on Course Report. In the meantime, you can follow Course Report on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're a Bootcamp alumni, don't forget to post a review of your coding bootcamp experience on Course Report. Your review is a huge help to anyone who's thinking of getting into tech. And that does it for today. Thanks so much.